You good?
I think I'm good.
How's it going?
It's going. Glad to be back.
Yeah?
Can you hear me good?
Yeah.
All right.
Here we are, Real Recovery Talk. I am your host, Tom Conrad. In today's episode, we've got Benjamin B.
What is happening, everyone?
What do you think of the new setup, Ben?
I'm adjusting. I got this boom in front of me.
You got free hands now.
I know. I don't know what to do with them.
Yeah. You can if we had a dartboard, you could play darts.
I could. I was never good at darts.
You could twiddle your thumbs.
Could twiddle my thumbs. I'm kind of checking out this armrest and this back. Yeah.
First things first, thank you for tuning in on the podcast app, whichever one it is that you so choose to use. And thank you for watching on YouTube. In the end, if you would like to reach out to us, you could always email us, tom@realrecoverytalk.com and ben@realrecoverytalk.com, and we will gladly email you back and ask you for your phone number so we can have a conversation with you about your specific situation. And ultimately, in the end, we want to help you turn your mess into your message. Right, Ben?
That is correct.
How was your trip?
It was a lot of fun, a lot of downtime because I had almost no self-service half the time. About a half-hour drive into town, on a lake cabin, did some fishing, drove in, got a workout at the local Anytime Fitness there, got a week pass, and stopped in. It was nice.
Did you go to any meetings while you were there?
I did.
How are they?
Small town USA meetings is where I went. I had a couple experiences that I wanted to share about today.
Well, I think we should get right into that.
I don't know what topic will come out of them necessarily, but I'm sure you'll come up with something.
Well, in this episode, it's just hey, we're glad to have Ben back episode.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah.
All right, glad to be back. So, it's really cool how when you've been involved in recovery, what do you say? You wear it like a loose garment? What do you mean by that?
I don't know. I've heard it from other people. Pull the mic closer to you a little bit.
All right. That better?
Yeah.
So I take this trip every year around the same time, June, July, and I was up there last year. There was a meeting that I went to, small town. When I went the first time, I think there was 3 or 4 people at the meeting. The next one, there was maybe 10. I think that's probably about as big as this meeting gets. But I go this year, and there was a gentleman the year previously who had 5 days sober. And I go to walk in the door this year. I make it about 3 steps in, and the guy chairing the meeting stands up, and he's like, "Oh, the Florida guy." So this dude remembered me, but now he had over a year sobriety and was chairing the meeting. Huge smile on his face, looked super cleaned up. Had a nice fresh shave, skin was glowing. What's it say? He had that starry-eyed look all right.
Oh, there you go.
Old boy was on fire.
Nice.
So it was really cool, though, because I had shared the podcast link with him last year. And I guess he's been listening ever since. And, it's just really cool that in Alcoholics Anonymous, for me, you can meet somebody one time, and that can have, a lasting effect. The guy, recognized me the second I walked in the door. It was really cool to experience that. Talk about feeling welcome at a meeting.
Yeah. How many people go to that meeting?
There was probably 10 people at that meeting that night.
Really?
Yeah, a little round robin. Everybody goes around and shares. One guy picked up 12-year medallion. So that was cool. Had some newcomers.
Did you go to a meeting every day or no?
No. So I got to Minnesota. I went to a town kind of locally or close to Minneapolis and went to a meeting there. Where I went for the cabin, there's literally no meetings. So there was
Unless
no
you're
option.
meeting with the bears.
Yep, exactly.
So let me ask you this. Minnesota is, you were using in Minnesota for a while, weren't you?
Yes.
Did you have any sort of I don't know, triggers or any sort of I used to get high there or stuff like that?
Euphoric recall.
Okay.
Is and also some anxiety. Keep in mind, this is over 12 years later. Wow. Minnesota is the last place I ever got high, and I spent a good 4 years there. getting really high. And I will tell you, driving those streets, being on that highway, and it just looks so different up there than it does from in Florida. In my mind, I could see myself. Every time I was driving, I felt like I was going to the dope man. It's the weirdest thing. Over 12 years later, keep that in mind. Now, don't get me wrong. Never did the thought cross my mind to go get high. And I bring this kind of stuff up to our clients all the time because to give people an idea, that's how strong of a grip alcoholism and addiction can have on somebody. It is like ingrained in me that when I'm in that area, I get this funny feeling of, oh, like you said, oh, I used to get high there. Oh, look at that place. I pulled into that rest stop 1,000,000 times on my way to the city, or whatever the case was.
What do you think it is that makes it different different now? You know, that now it's like a fleeting thought versus if you would have gone back there, you know, a year into your sobriety.
A year into my sobriety, I honestly don't know if I would have made it.
Really?
And to tell you what the difference is that's a tough one to answer. I mean, I've gotten so much in my life at this point that I would really have to think hard about throwing it all away. Because for me, and I know this for myself, like that first step, you know, admitting that I'm powerless over alcohol and drugs, like I really, really admit that today. And I truly know that taking just one, there's no such thing as that. Like I will lose everything. Hands down. One beer, I will lose everything. I'm convinced of that. And if I could get away with it, is it even worth trying?
Right.
You know, so.
Well, that's where it's, you get to that point in your sobriety that the risk versus reward just isn't there anymore.
No. Yeah, that's actually a really good way to put it because there is a reward from doing drugs.
Yeah.
And drinking.
Sure.
Like that feel good, that social anxiety goes away. You know, there is, and I've brought this up 1,000,000 times on the podcast, but I always ask our clients, what did alcohol and drugs do for you? And like there, for instance, there's a bar that I worked out up there. I was a bartender and a bouncer. And when we drove by, you know, it's hard not to sit there and reminisce about like, oh, I had some nice cold beers there. And to think, oh, I wonder who's in there and what's going on in there. But it's at the point today where I just keep driving by. It's not even worth checking out. That makes sense. What am I trying to do? Relive my experience? It's like, what do they call it? Chasing the dragon? You're chasing that first high. You're chasing those experiences again. Like, there's no end of the road to that for me.
Yeah, there's a lot of times people talk about you're constantly trying to chase that first high. You know, that first feeling that you got and I think with crackheads it's even more. For whatever reason, you know, I never went down the crack road, thankfully, but I've spoken to a lot of crackheads and they all say the same thing. Every time they would smoke crack, they would try and smoke enough to, they would have that feeling like they did the very first time they smoked crack. And they never got it.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is you actually get further and further away from it.
Yeah.
So nothing feels like the first hit.
Which is why, hence, you know, you build your tolerance up and stuff like that. Now you're, you know, robbing your parents and everything else and pawning everything and smoking crack every 10 minutes.
Yeah. Maybe we could talk about this part. I don't know where we would necessarily go with it, but here's the other thing too is on these trips, I'm the only real alcoholic there. All the other adults drink. Yeah. So these cabin trips, I mean, let's just call it what it is. Most people's families out there. I don't know too many families that aren't that way. They bring alcohol along, right? Like,
yeah.
I mean, people go on a camping trip, they take alcohol. People go in a cabin, they take alcohol. So
wouldn't be as fun without.
I don't even know how to respond to that because I had fun.
I know.
But I did have to for me, figure out ways to kind of break away from everybody else at points in times. Not that like it's at the point where it doesn't bother me. Like I don't sit there salivating over watching other people drink. It's not like that at all. But there are points where like, 8 o'clock rolls around, 9 o'clock, and everyone's sitting up playing board games and stuff. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go retire and try and sit in a certain corner of the cabin where I do get Wi-Fi and a little bit of internet service and watch some Netflix or something, like rather than staying up till 1, 2 a.m. Like I just...
Did they make it awkward for you at all?
No. Everybody knows I'm sober. They know I take it seriously. Like if I say I'm going to a meeting, I go to a meeting. No one says anything when I say, hey, I'm driving into town a half hour away to go to the gym. Nobody says anything because I think everybody kind of realizes too, like I'm the only guy there that doesn't drink.
Right.
So, but would I be able to do a trip like that in early sobriety? Probably not.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's important to have, people in your life, in your sober network, and in the people that, in your sober community that can kind of tell you that. Because at a year sober or 6 months sober or whatever, if that trip opportunities presented itself to take that trip, most people at 6 months of sobriety would think, oh, I'm well enough to do that.
See, and I would advise somebody not to go.
Right.
Here's the direction we can go right now. Like, the first few years of my recovery, I would probably say no to taking this trip.
Sure.
It's easy for me now. It's not, I don't want to make it present it like it's a problem, but if I were in early recovery, this is not something I would be doing.
Right.
I would advise against.
I remember I had 6 months of sobriety and I was sitting in a meeting. And and I've shared this story on the podcast before. The Steelers were in the playoffs and they were playing at home, and I was going to fly up to Pittsburgh to go to this playoff game in Pittsburgh. And, cause a bunch of my friends were going, and I thought sure as hell I'd be fine. I'm just going to go, I'm going to, I'll drink water and everything else and, go tailgate and do the whole deal and I'd be fine. And I shared this in a meeting, As a matter of fact, I think I shared in the context of, hey, I won't be here next week because I'm going to this game, so on and so forth, And, man, I got swarmed with people after saying, what are you doing? And I'm like, what do you mean? What am I doing? I'm going up and back home, go watch the Steelers. And, I'm going to go, I'm a Steeler fan. What's the problem? And every single one of them said, do not go. Don't go. Don't go. And I didn't go. Hindsight's 2020. Looking back on it, had I gone, I would have definitely drank.
And I want to remind our listeners, this is why Tom stayed sober after going to treatment one time. He literally took it's suggestions like these, because how often do we have clients, even some of the families that we have, how many times do you think this scenario's come up? Oh, we have a family vacation coming up to the Bahamas or Jamaica in 3 months, so we want them to go to treatment now so they can be out in time to go to Jamaica.
Oh my gosh.
We've literally gotten that, and we got to say to the family, like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
I mean, not to be negative, but you might as well not even send them to treatment until after Jamaica.
Right. Well, at that point, I mean, you think we're miracle workers,
Yeah.
And that's always, and the hardest part about that is the person that's going into treatment knows about this trip that's planned.
Mm-hmm.
And, they say, oh, I'm only going to do 30 days because I'm going to Costa Rica next month. And it's like, what are you going to do there? Oh, it's been a trip that's been planned for X, Y, and Z. And, I'm just going to go there, and I can't say no now,
Yeah,
and now
you can.
And that's the thing. It's like, well, yes, you can actually,
That's kind of what I wanted to come out and say, that no is an okay answer.
Right.
Like, because a lot of times another one that we hear, and this one's a touchy subject, but I don't know why this is always the case, but people come to treatment and then a family member passes away or a close friend. How oftentimes do we get a client here? They've been here for a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, and all of a sudden they have a funeral to go to. It's unfortunate that it happens, but the majority of the time I tell our clients, do not go to that funeral. And because if they want to honor their loved one would want to see them sober, A. But B, the chances that somebody will make it going to a funeral and coming back sober, slim to none.
Yeah, and the person that died, if they're close enough to you to where you need to go to their funeral, chances are they probably, if they were alive, they would tell you, don't come to my funeral.
Definitely.
You know what I mean?
100%. Yeah,
and let's call the obvious. They're dead. You know,
Yeah.
you're going to put yourself at risk to go to a funeral. And I have to believe it is 9 times out of 10, it's self-serving. It's an excuse to go back home.
Yes.
It's not, has nothing to do with, oh, I loved grandma so much. And, because if you love grandma so much, you probably wouldn't have been shooting dope in her bathroom for the last 5 years anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And now grandma's dead and you want to go back to her funeral. No, you want to go back and see your buddies, or you want to go back and do X, Y, and Z. Now, there are people out there that genuinely do love the grandma. I get it, but,
Yeah, not trying
it's an
to
excuse.
Not trying to seem insensitive, but the reality of the situation is our clients come to us on death's door. Life is absolutely falling apart a lot of times, and this has to be priority. Let's call it what it is.
Sobriety has to stay number one.
It really does.
There's nothing that can come in between it. And I say this all the time to people, whether it's somebody that's seeking treatment or somebody that's seeking treatment for a loved one. Nothing else matters.
Yeah.
At this point. No job matters. No family matters. Nothing matters. Like, they need to be the most selfish, self-centered person at this very moment.
It's interesting what you just said, how jobs don't matter. How many of our clients, out of curiosity, percentage-wise, would you say come down here, they get short-term disability, leave of absence from work, family medical leave of absence. They want to go back to their job. They're keeping it, but their job knows they're in treatment, and then they end up leaving the job anyway.
Oh, my gosh. All the time.
Probably most of them.
Yeah. Well, because they come to a realization, too, that, I don't want to go back to a job that I hate.
Yep. And they have an opportunity to recreate their life in a totally different way.
Yeah.
And and I love it when that happens. Business is business. But in a way, I feel bad for that business that thought they had an employee coming back. But when I see that happen, I literally look at the client and I'm like, great job.
Right.
I'm glad you made the decision to leave that job, because how many times do we hear, for instance, we'll have somebody in detox and they'll be coming to us afterwards for our PHP IOP program, and the detox case manager therapist will give us a heads up. They are so fixated on getting back to this job. They need to let it go. And then they get here still fixated on the job. It's a huge win when somebody prioritizes their recovery over going back to this toxic job. And most of the time, they don't even realize the job is toxic,
right,
for their recovery.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's growth, ultimately, is what it is.
It's a good day when a client comes to that realization. One other thing I wanted to touch on about the trip, too, I don't know if our listeners know about this, or we've probably touched on it in the past, but I was sitting in the airport in Minneapolis at the terminal getting ready to board the flight and come back home, and I could hear, maybe 10 feet down from me, a random guy and a random girl. Hey, I'm a friend of Bill's. And the girl looks over, oh, I'm a friend of Bill's too. And then I stand up to go to the restroom, and I heard the friend of Bill's part, and right as I'm walking by, the girl's like, I got 2 years. And the guy's like, I got 38 years. And I'm walking by, I get fist bumping both. I'm like, 12 years. And they both started laughing. But It's super cool. So, they have it on cruise ships. They have it at the airport. So, if you go to what's the little flight desk, the little desk in front of the gate?
I don't know.
What's that called?
The desk that's in front of the gate at an airport.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Doesn't have a name.
Concierge?
Sure.
Okay.
Anyway, if you're an alcoholic and you're struggling in an airport, you can go up to one of those people and they'll make an announcement looking for a friend to Bill W.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and at gate 7C or C7 or whatever, and people from AA know friends of Bill. They'll come to that gate and sit with someone if they're an alcoholic and struggling.
That's
so anyway,
cool.
But that's how we picked up on it in the airport because I heard him. I'm a friend of Bill's. But anyway, we land in Fort Lauderdale, and this guy, I'll say his first name. No one will know who he is. Glenn from Fort Lauderdale, who has 38 years.
Oh,
He's
Glenn.
yeah, Glenn.
Oh, Glenn.
Anyway, he's like, yeah, man, where's your home group? I'm telling him, I'm at Easy Does It Club. And he's, I'm in Fort Lauderdale at such and such place. I forget where he said, but asked me if I want to come down there and speak sometime. But we got to get this. I got to contact him. He got my number from me. And then he called me like a half hour later just to make sure it was the right number and stuff, man. People are super down to earth and cool. Like, here I am at the airport. I catch a guy before getting on the plane and then catch him in Fort Lauderdale when we land. And it's kind of funny because Whitney and the kids are off getting the bags, and Whitney's like giving me the stink eye from the corner because I'm like having this conversation with this guy about AA.
And she's lugging all the luggage.
She's lugging all the luggage.
Yeah.
That's literally how it went down.
Yeah. Well, that's funny. So, well, that's a good piece of information. So if you're traveling and you need, you're feeling a little squirrely or whatever, just go, to the concierge desk and say you need a friend of Bill's.
We were just talking about people going home for funerals and stuff like that. There are situations, for instance, we have clients who occasionally have like a court case back home, say in New York or Ohio or wherever they're from, and they have to go, no question. So, a lot of times I'll tell them about that because, man, they might only have 30 days, and it's really easy to have a drink at the airport bar or on the airplane. And on an airplane, the only thing sitting between you and a drink is God.
Yeah.
Call it what it is. Unless I don't know, God works in mysterious ways. He'll often put like a 12-step person right next to you in your seat. But point is, it's like I tell our clients about that all the time. Hey, man, if you're struggling, go to that, ask them for a friend of Bill's. Someone will come walking down. Guarantee you there's people in that airport that'll come to you.
Yeah, and if you don't, that's on you,
Yeah.
A lot of relapses happen in the airports.
A lot.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. Well, hey, I think this was a good episode. It was a good, introduction of welcoming Ben back. And, yeah, man, we got to get some interviews. I've put out some episodes, the past few of just me, and I think people are over it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to be back.
All right.
I watched some of your
Were they good?
lonely. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
What'd you do? How to Stay Motivated?
Yeah.
What was the other one? I Hate Sobriety or
Yeah.
something?
Sobriety sucks.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Well, that was the How to Stay Motivated one.
Oh, that was the same one? What was the other one?
I forget.
I'll have to go back and watch again.
Yeah.
I only made it about halfway through.
Oh, okay. That's why our YouTube analytics aren't good.
Oh, that should just leave it running.
All right. That is it for this episode of Real Recovery Talk. Thank you. In the end, if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, you can always reach us, Tom, at realrecoverytalk.com and Ben at realrecoverytalk.com. And ultimately, we want to help you turn your mess into your message. That is it. We will see y'all later.